example, people, there's puppet masters trying to control the narrative. And now appears if she wants to run for supervisor again.
The egotistical mayor of Dalton, Illinois, once considered an unstoppable force in local politics, Tiffany Henyard, is now dealing with a barrage of accusations ranging from extravagant spending of taxpayer dollars to dubious leadership choices that have quickly undermined her authority and influence. Her political empire is collapsing at a rate that few could have predicted, sending shockwaves through her most devoted supporters and critics alike. According to press reports, money meant for public services has been diverted to private indulgences, including first-class travel, stays at upscale hotels, and lavish gatherings, even though Henyard maintains that these costs were required to carry out her responsibilities. Many Dalton citizens live in poverty and depend on the very resources that the city provides, and opponents contend that they reveal a larger problem of poor management and a lack of concern for their financial difficulties. She is charged with abusing the dispute, which goes beyond the accusations that she surrounded herself with unfit or loyalist appointees have fueled the fire, with critics calling her administration more like a personal thumb than a public office for appointing a police chief who did not meet legal requirements. Her financial missteps and divisive leadership style have further alienated coworkers, residents, and even some of her former allies. Prerequisites for openly arguing about fiscal decisions with the town's board. Some see Henyard's defiance as resilience, while others see it as arrogance. Her detractors claim that these actions have contributed to a growing dysfunctional atmosphere in Dalton, where basic public services are still under stress, streets are falling into disarray, and trust in local governance has hit an all-time low despite the chaos. Supporters of Arden are adamant that her difficulties are the result of a politically driven witch hunt intended to destroy a strong, ambitious female leader. They echo her claim that her enemies, who lack the necessary charisma and influence, have planned to destroy her through coordinated attacks and legal maneuvers. But the increasing amount of evidence and the growing number of investigations ranging from misappropriation of even as she makes fervent defenses in public, it has become more and more difficult for her to sustain a narrative of pure victimhood due to town monies being used for ethical code violations. What is evident is that Henyard's disintegration has been exacerbated by his vehement rhetoric and refusal to accept accountability for these scandals, which have split the town into factions of ardent defenders and relentless detractors. Her leadership choices have left the small town reeling, and the effects go far beyond the accusations themselves. The financial instability, legal disputes, and operational chaos could push Dalton further into crisis. But some contend that this collapse could lead to systemic change and accountability in local governance, as her administration is still being investigated and her resignation is being demanded. On her capacity to bounce back from the setback and rebuild her reputation, will her political career be characterized by scandals and broken promises, or will she emerge as a figure of triumph who triumphed against adversity? For now, Henyard is still on a wild roller coaster of scandal that appears to be headed for an abrupt finish, much like her ascent to power did.
Because two trustees, as you mentioned, did not show up, Chris Gonzalez and Carmen Carlisle. Without them, not enough board members were present to make official.
The political stakes could not have been higher when the town, for the first time in decades, decided to select its nominees through a caucus instead of the more conventional primary election process. At the heart of this shift was Mayor Tiffany Henyard, who also serves as the township's supervisor of Thor and hopes to be on the ballot for the next 2024 election. But the night at the Homewood Flossmoor, at the Park District Auditorium, things did not go as planned because of a procedural error that disqualified her, severely damaging her political ambitions. Many people consider this to be the biggest loss of her career. Illinois State Senator Napoleon Harris, who chairs the Democratic Committee in Thoron Township, led the caucus, drawing hundreds of locals to watch the political drama unfold despite the cold weather. The venue was packed with both candidates' supporters and detractors, who knew that this gathering could alter the political landscape. When the results were announced, the atmosphere was electrified, with Harris winning the Democratic nomination for the town supervisor's statement and successfully eliminating Henyard from the race. This was met with applause and some particularly enthusiastic shouts. Felt more like a partisan battle than a normal political meeting. In a statement after the session, Henyard accused Harris and the Democratic committee of planning to block her bid, characterizing the caucus as an effort to further her run. The scene is referred to by some as a political MTV drop moment, with Harris walking away victorious and Henyard crying in defeat. Some argue that Sears' assertions are the final option of a politician who has been involved in scandals while serving as mayor or supervisor, despite the fact that the accusations provoked debate. According to Next, the caucus complied with the law and followed processes in several other Illinois municipalities, even though Harris' poise and sense of finality may have been reminiscent of unfair techniques that suppressed voters. Plan for Thorne Township because the decision not only made people more aware of the stakes, but also marked a significant shift in local politics, leaving residents and onlookers to speculate about what lies ahead for the two main players in these epic battles.
Right here in Thorne Township. You could also say that she flunked out because her name is
Tiffany Henyard hurried out of the Homewood Floor Park District Auditorium with a few of her most devoted supporters in a stunning turn of events that demonstrated both defiance and division. Her voice was heard as she accused others of corruption and wrongdoing, specifically State Senator Napoleon Harris, the chair of the Democratic Committee in Thorne Township, of overseeing an unfair process and shouting that he didn't run any of this the right way legally. She refused to give up without a fight, as evidenced by her vehement speech during the caucus vote that evening, which many described as chaotic but decisive, effectively ending her tenure as the Democratic candidate for supervisor of Thorne Township. She was officially removed from the Democratic ballot, a public and symbolic blow that highlighted her increasingly shaky hold on power. Her outburst was more than just a simple display of frustration. It was a declaration of defiance directed at the circumstances that had harmed her political reputation, as well as her detractors. The loss was more than just a procedural setback. It was a humiliating moment in front of an audience of constituents and political opponents that cemented her reputation as one of the most divisive political figures in Illinois. As she left the auditorium, her supporters gathered around her, echoing. Hen's camp argued that the venue's capacity restrictions and procedural changes prevented many of her supporters, some of whom were elderly and frail, from participating. Harris and the caucus organizers, backed by their legal team, denied these claims, claiming that the caucus upheld an open and lawful procedure and complied with Illinois law. However, Harris' camp claimed that the decision to hold a caucus was unprecedented in Thorne Township for decades and that it was a legal and calculated decision. Henyard, a figure who built her political career on a combination of controversy and tenacity, made it seem unlikely that she would simply give up the battle. But for all of her defiance and the loyalty of her core supporters, the events of the evening marked a turning point. This defeat caused Henyard to reevaluate her political future because her name was removed from the Democratic ballot, raising the possibility that she would try a last-minute change of heart by running as an independent or even a right-leaning candidate, but also ran the risk of further dividing her already divided base of support. This public defeat was seen as a reflection of her waning credibility due to mismanagement and accusations of self-serving governance. But her supporters saw the caucus as a political ambush meant to remove a strong-willed leader. Their accusations of an unfair process and voter suppression further highlighted the polarizing divide that Henyard has come to represent in Illinois politics. The defeat brought to light the difficulties she faces in maintaining her position of authority, as well as in redefining her political identity in the face of the growing scandals that have plagued Perrier as mayor of Dalton and Thorne Townships. It was clear to both fans and skeptics that the fight was far from over. The events of the evening not only marked the boundaries of her impending political confrontation, but they also symbolized the challenges faced by a leader whose perseverance and defiance define her career, even as they Adele's reference to Tiffany Kennedy's tragic political defeat, which struck a chord with her supporters and sparked a public outcry against her leadership. is a natural part of the court controversy at the top. Critics use the occasion to paint her defeat as yet another stunning example of her governance failings and as a clear sign that her entire hold. Among the flurry of online criticism, power was rapidly eroding. A particularly outspoken resident used social media to urge action and mobilize others to support her removal as soon as possible. Many people, already fed up with her contentious and scandalous reign, started to publicly a quote that surfaced that echoed the idea that the more power one has, the more corrupt they become, encapsulated the spirit of Har's time. Many disillusioned residents expressed their dissatisfaction with her leadership, believing it to be not only ineffective, but actively detrimental to the interests of the people she was supposed to serve. Purported decrease her combative attitude towards criticism and her refusal to have meaningful conversations about the issues that affected their lives only served to stoke the simmering resentment of those who demanded accountability, and her continued defiance in the face of mounting scandals seemed to validate their grievances as the public outcry grew and Henyard's political future appeared more precarious than ever before. Residents of the community felt increasingly alienated from Henyard's policies. Had previously appeared to her supporters to be unwavering resolve, but now came across as sheer stubbornness, which caused her to lose badly in the caucus. This was not only a symbolic setback for the wider electorate, it was a concrete rejection of her leadership style, which emphasized their growing disenchantment with the leadership style that appeared to be driven by personal ambition. Many members of the public felt that the distance between her administration and the public grew even more after her defeat. Her leadership, which had previously inspired hope for change, became a representation of the consequences of political complacency as calls for increased responsibility and transparency got louder. The community's growing frustrations and contempt for legal requirements and financial irresponsibility led to a resolute call for accountability, which marked the turning point in the collective desire for political renewal. This arrogance increased with each new accusation against her of extravagant spending, her henchmen decisions that frequently left residents feeling abandoned, and her frequent dismissal of public concerns. Her tenure demonstrates the dangers of misguided faith as she battled the fallout from her defeat once and found it tough to reconcile with her constituents. Each scandal further damaged her reputation as a leader who once took pride in her tenacity and fortitude. She and her most ardent supporters may also continue to dispute the legitimacy of the process that led to her collapse. To fully understand Tiffany Henyard's dramatic fall from grace, one must consider her quick ascent to fame and the carefully crafted image that once positioned her as a rising star. Weaving authority suddenly seemed brittle, making it difficult for her to stay relevant and star in local politics. She was initially praised as a visionary leader before landing the uncommon combined positions of supervisor of Thoron Township and mayor of Dalton, which boosted her stature and cemented her as a powerful figure. This dual authority not only strengthened her, but also revealed weaknesses in her meticulously maintained facade. Among the most damaging accusations was the discovery of extravagant spending, including an astounding $33,000. It became evident that the electorate's tolerance had run dry due to the stark contrast between Hen's apparent wealth and the financial struggles of the people she was chosen to serve. For community purposes, Amazon was taxed for Dome residents, many of whom had median incomes far below $50,000. When information about Henyard's spending patterns surfaced, revealing what many saw as egregious negligence and a detachment from her constituent concerns, the community's outrage was evident. This revelation caused a great deal of discontent among constituents who had trusted a leader and felt shocked, angry, and betrayed. "It's disgusting that she's living like a queen while we can barely get by," said one Dalton resident, expressing the growing resentment among her voters. The claim showed a leader living a luxury lifestyle while disregarding her urgent needs. The accusations of misconduct not only damaged her reputation, but also served as a stark reminder of how far her leadership had strayed from the ideals she had professed. Her financial decisions became emblematic of a deeper hypocrisy, highlighting a glaring disparity between her promises of service and the self-serving reality that residents perceived in her leadership. These feelings of betrayal fueled a groundswell of disillusionment, sparking calls for accountability and driving in as the political fallout became inevitable and scrutiny increased. Even her most ardent fans lost faith in her administration, which had once been a shining example of a champion for the people, after a betrayal between her public persona and her apparent private objectives. The administration was praised for its integrity and transparency.
It's all it took for Tiffany Henyard to come out as the Democratic nominee for Thornton Township Supervisor.
For many, the disclosure of her purported financial mismanagement, which weakened her base of support and caused a dramatic change in public opinion among those who had previously seen her as a beacon of hope for change at this time, has replaced professionalism with a story of greed and poor management. Some now view Sager's leadership as a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition, and the same platform that had enabled her to rise to power on promises was destroyed when Tiffany Henyard's political career collapsed. She was involved in scandal and made decisions that not only highlighted the growing gap between the leader she claimed to be and the realities faced by the average Hugh resident, but also made her death seem inevitable due to self-interested critics who used her story as a symbol of political excess. Not only overshadowed her accomplishments, but also put her personal comfort ahead of the community's welfare. The accusations against her solidified her image as a contentious figure with untapped potential, and her political downfall had an effect far beyond her immediate circle of influence. It also served as a warning that the unbridled pursuit of power can alienate and deceive those who wish to leave Dome. Locals are feeling disillusioned and frustrated because of the pointless and politically driven fighting that is severely preventing the community from receiving effective services. They want to spoken out about the detrimental effects these ongoing conflicts are having on their day-to-day lives, as basic services have been compromised and important projects have been delayed, shifting the focus away from emergency needs of society to concentrating on political disputes. Henyard whether the Democratic candidate for Thornton Township Supervisor is genuinely working for the people she represents, or if her activities are motivated more by personal ambitions and power conflicts, her charges turned into a focal point for reform, reiterating calls for humble leadership, according to Stephanie Wheatman. Henyard abruptly leaving the campaign after just 7 minutes brought the matter to a head. This action demonstrated the high financial stakes in this ongoing conflict, and she and the many other parties involved could face severe repercussions, including the potential for a hefty $40,000 fine if the deadlines for necessary permits are missed and approvals are not received. More than just political plotting, the problem is that taxpayers might have to return money that has already been allocated for the project. According to the Park District's executive director, residents won't have access to better parks and family-friendly areas if the funding and permits expire. The neighborhood has become divided due to the Park District's aggressive and domineering leadership style, which has increased risks and hampered significant advancement on important projects. In addition, even though Henyard has not been charged, the FBI's investigation into her administration is still ongoing and remains one of the most devastating blows to her political authority. Her inner circle, which was once unwavering in its support, is now starting to fall apart, with longtime allies reportedly moving away and staff resignations stoking rumors of expanding internal conflict. Her tenure has reportedly been tarnished by the investigation's very existence, and some have accused her of being corrupt in her leadership, further eroding public trust. However, Henyard has tried to counter the growing criticism by accusing her detractors of launching a smear campaign in a recent heated Facebook video, in which she vehemently questioned why she is. At the same time that her political rivals are trying to divert your attention from all of this attention, she has further alienated the public by ignoring those who criticize her ineffective administration, as evidenced by the growing arguments and disputes. Henyard leadership is dealing with both internal and external challenges. There are a lot of risks for her political career, and every scandal that happens, merely serves to exacerbate her already waning support as significant projects are postponed and delayed while she tries to sway public opinion by planning neighborhood gatherings and interacting with the media, which has mostly backfired by accusing her of desperation and trying to pass off her empathy for the community in a forced and comical way due to her aggressive and controlling leadership. Due to the fact that significant grant funding is running out and community projects are regrettably failing, her leadership style has alienated a lot of people and expanded the view that she is out of touch with the needs of the people she is to serve.